South Korea's main opposition party has said that it would initiate impeachment proceedings against President Yoon Yeol unless he immediately resigned.
And this after his short-lived declaration of martial law overnight. Yoon imposed martial law, vowing to eliminate anti-state forces as he struggled against an opposition that controls parliament and that he accuses of sympathizing with communist North Korea.
This move plunged the country into its deepest turmoil in its modern democratic history. A fleet of tanks, armored vehicles were mobilized as thousands flooded the streets. Lawmakers jumped fences and tussled with security forces so that they could reach the parliament and vote to overturn the law.
The president's surprising move harkened back to an era of authoritarian leaders that the country had not seen since the 1980s, and it was immediately denounced by the opposition and the leader of Yoon's own party.
Yoon Yeol backed down after 190 lawmakers managed to get into the assembly and unanimously voted to oppose the martial law. The vote was 190 to 0. Under the constitution, martial law must be lifted when a majority in parliament demands it. While announcing his plan to lift martial law, Yoon Yeol continued to criticize parliament's attempts to impeach key government officials and senior prosecutors and lawmakers.
I request that the parliament immediately ceases the reckless actions that are paralyzing the functions of the state, such as repeated impeachment, legislative manipulation and budget manipulation.
The U-turn prompted celebrations among protesters outside Parliament who had been braving the freezing temperatures.
Meanwhile, despite South Korea being a major ally for the United States in Asia, Washington said it was not given advance notice of Yoon's plan to impose martial law.
We are relieved President Yoon Yeol has reversed course on his concerning declaration of martial law and respected the ROK National Assembly's vote to end it. A National Security Council spokesperson said this.
On the other hand, UK, Japan said that they were closely monitoring the developments. China, a key ally of North Korea, urged its nationals in the south to stay calm and exercise caution. All right, for more on this, we're now being joined live by Dr. Robert Edwin Kelly from Busan. He is a professor of political science at Busan National University. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Now, sir, the martial law lasted all of 6 hours.
Right.
Do you reckon this was an impulsive decision that was easily quashed in the parliament? And also, I just wanted to understand what your assessment of these anti-state forces is that Yoon Yeol has been trying to thwart.
Yeah, first of all, I do think it was impulsive. I don't think anybody out there who studies South Korean politics expected this. I had took lots and lots of emails from friends who were saying, what is this? What's going on? I think really everybody was really surprised by this. I don't think the Yoon administration telegraphed this in any meaningful way. And it looks like Yoon did it for fairly small, unimportant reasons, like investigations into his wife and the budget and things like that. I mean, that's pretty shocking. I do think the the larger issue, though, right, the anti-state forces that he's talked about. What this, I think, what that is sort of code for in South Korean politics is the suspicion by conservative parties, conservative politicians in South Korea, that left-wing parties in South Korea are pro-North Korea, and that they are willing to make excessive concessions, if you will, to North Korea in order to broker a peace, that they are sort of like Marxist or pro-communist or something like that. And that kind of language is left over in South Korea, in part because the Cold War still is continuing in Korea. And so there's a lot of the kind of anti-communist suspicion and paranoia that used to characterize the West, 40 years ago, that still exists in South Korea.
Dr. Kelly, given the lack of support that Yoon Yeol found within his own party, I just wanted to understand, seeing the way the martial law was in a way thwarted within hours, and it happened through the parliament, even though there were a limited number of lawmakers who were there, and I think out of 300 there were just 190, and all of them voted in favor of, rather against the martial law. What do you feel this is, how will this impact South Korea politics going forward, especially in terms of Yoon Yeol's further term?
Right, his presidency. Yeah, I think he has to resign. I mean, in a democratic system, you just can't do this. I mean, I don't know. Donald Trump tried to overthrow the U.S. government and got reelected. So I don't know. Maybe Yoon thinks he can do something like that, right? But I mean, in a functioning democratic system, if you try to declare martial law, particularly for petty reasons like you can't get the budget you want, he should resign, and that's already what you're seeing, right? You're seeing labor unions and protesters and the left-wing parties in South Korea all demanding that he resign. His approval rating is under 20%, so he has no strong public backing to help keep him in office to overcome this. I don't see how he can stay in office at this point. If he decides to stay, he'll almost certainly face impeachment. South Korea already went through an impeachment 7 years ago, and they did it successfully without street violence or anything like that. So South Korea actually has experience impeaching presidents. It would be a shame for South Korea's stability if it had to impeach 2 presidents in less than a decade, but I just don't see what alternative there is at this point.
Dr. Kelly, also you're joining us from Busan. I wanted to just understand from you, what were those 5-6 hours like when this martial law was in place?
Yeah, my family was sleeping. That's why people think it's like a coup, because he did it at like 11 o'clock at night, right? It was declared at like 11:15. I mean, I have 2 kids, right? And we went to bed and woke up, and there it was already wrapping itself up. I mean, that's why there was a lot of suspicion that this wasn't martial law, but it was something like a coup, because you don't declare martial law at 11 o'clock at night and send the military into the streets when 80% of the population is asleep, right? I mean, that's one of the other things that's going to drive him out. This doesn't look like it was legitimately martial law. It looks like some kind of coup d'etat.
Dr. Kelly, I also wanted to understand the reasons leading up to the declaration of the martial law, because as I mentioned earlier as well, South Korea has not seen political tensions flare up in such a manner in decades. So what were the reasons that led up to this?
Yeah, and I think that's what people are really kind of confused about. I mean, we're still waiting to hear from Yoon himself, but it looks like he was frustrated by opposition in the parliament, where he faces a pretty solid liberal bloc. Yoon is from the Conservative Party. He faces a liberal progressive bloc in the parliament that was blocking a lot of his initiatives. I would argue that they were actually blocking him too much, that they were being obsessively obstructionist. I'm kind of sympathetic to Yoon's frustration with the South Korean parliament, but he went way too far, obviously, right? And then there were also Yoon's wife has been investigated. President Yoon's wife has been investigated for corruption, and there have been a lot of charges sort of swirling around her and her behavior for a couple of years. And the president personally is apparently very sensitive to this. He takes it really badly. He sees this as some kind of personal attack on the woman that he loves. And I think that's what was behind it. It doesn't look like this was some kind of coordinated thing. Like you said in your first question, it looks like it was kind of thrown together because, the police didn't seem to know very much about it. Nobody knew it was coming. It came out in the middle of the night.
Dr. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us right here on World DNA. And it was, I would say, informative to understand exactly what you were going through while staying in South Korea, because it happened in the middle of the night, and by the time everyone woke up to it was pretty much over.
Right.
So
it's pretty bizarre, right? So
definitely bizarre. And what kind of implications it will have, that's something we will need to track closely and observe. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your insights.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and now we're also joined by Bill Gallo, a Voice of America correspondent from Seoul. Bill, thank you so much for joining us. We were just speaking to Dr. Kelly, trying to understand what the situation is like. From what he said, this appeared to be more of a coup d'etat than an actual martial law because it happened in the middle of the night. I want to understand from you, what's your perspective of this? What is actually happening at the moment?
It doesn't seem like this was very coordinated. I think that everyone is trying to put together the pieces at this point to find out exactly what happened. But as you may have discovered by now, we were all shocked by this. No one, and I mean no one, saw this coming in any way. It had actually been the subject of rumors for months by opposition officials who are big critics of Yoon. But this was mainly seen as sort of the typical mudslinging and back and forth that happens in Korea quite frequently. When this actually happened, though, it seemed very haphazard. In fact, the military didn't seem all that interested in actually enforcing Yoon's decree at all. You're seeing these images emerge from South Korea's parliament last night of the military sort of half-heartedly trying to interrupt proceedings, and then they were pushed back by a glass door and some legislative aides who had a fire extinguisher they were spraying at them. Obviously, the military could have pushed through if they wanted. So perhaps that suggests there was not a high degree of coordination involved in this martial law attempt.
Bill, I just wanted to understand from you, there were visuals of military vehicles on the roads, and there were also, reports suggesting that military helicopters were in, over Seoul. Do you feel that can be mobilized last minute, even if this was an impulsive decision?
I don't know. I really don't know. I know there were helicopters, and I know there were lots of troops, and I know that the South Korean people very firmly, in the middle of the night, came out to stop this in whatever way they could. And I also know that it didn't take very much to get the South Korean military to stand down. I think that whenever it was determined that, enough lawmakers had entered the parliament and passed this overruling of the decree, it was notable, I think, how quickly Yoon actually said, okay, that's it, it's done, I give up. So really, it's unclear what exactly happened. That's the most notable thing of all this, I think, is just it's random. Nobody expected it. And Yoon is a leader that is prone to sort of making confusing decisions. But this one really, really is more confusing than anything we've ever seen.
This is what we've been discussing, and through our discussions, everyone seems to be drawing a blank there. What exactly happened? Because all of this happened over the course of a night. First there was martial law that was declared, then he stepped down completely, he took a step back. What we're trying to understand is what really led to this decision, because it is a pretty big decision to make. It's a Herculean task to get martial law into force, and how does that happen?
Well, I'm sorry I don't have better answers for you on this. All we really have is speculation. And I think Dr. Kelly did a good job of sort of laying out the various factors involved. I think that it is true that Yoon was very offended at the political attacks on his wife. I think he was very frustrated at the constant sort of political dysfunction and gridlock that has taken place in Parliament ever since he has been president. And that has only gotten worse after he lost the April legislative election. I think he took these problems very seriously. He is known, another big factor here, he is known to sort of smear his critics as being communists or pro-North Korea sympathizers. That is a vast oversimplification. There are certainly people in the political opposition who want to pursue better relations with North Korea, and you can agree or disagree with that. But to paint them as pro-North Korea or puppets of North Korea is an extreme simplification. So it may genuinely be that he sees the world in this way and has actually acted on those inclinations. We really don't know.
Well, as for the reactions we've picked up by now, it seems this entire ordeal has only reflected badly on Yoon Suk-yeol, and it exposes the lack of support he has from his own party, also the impulsive nature of the decisions he made. It's only reflecting all of that. Also, the fact that the opposition, the Democratic Party, is in majority in the parliament. So this was going to get overruled anyway, martial law. There is a provision for the parliament to rule it out. Very questionable decision, and we can only speculate as of now, but I think it's better we wait for the details to really draw a conclusion of what really happened. Thank you so much for joining us, Bill, and getting us all the latest. That was Bill Gallo, Voice of America correspondent, joining us from Seoul.